World Wars is a game on the Hypixel network that has held a very special place in mine and many others' hearts. I have spent a lot of time on this game personally, achieving a spot on both the wins and kills leaderboard, at one point being number 2 on both simultaneously, and I own, and with the help of a few others, run the largest World Wars based Discord server. Because of this, I see myself qualified, and would like to talk about— Bro, you gotta be kidding me. Because of this, I see myself qualified, and would like to talk about the update that was released today, along with the overall health of the game itself, and why it seems to be failing on the network even to today. First, I want to address what the update got right. This is honestly a pretty easy point, as Wars has not received an update since a Ghost patch sometime in either May or June. I can't really remember, and I can't find a forums post on it, so I'm kind of just taking a guess there, but I know it was pretty soon after the game came out. Obviously, the new prestige icons are really cool, and a lot of people seem to be liking them, and they add a new incentive for grinding. The second thing this update got right was the team selectors that they added into private games. I feel like this is kind of a gimme, because it's just like expected for most games that have private games supported on Hypixel, but it's going to be really huge for us because we run tournaments, and it's been really hard to get people to queue together. And I think overall this will make our tournaments run way smoother, and I think it's just a good thing to have in any game mode, especially one that's so inherently competitive like World Wars. Those are the two biggest changes I wanted to address. Everything else in this forums post is also a really good change overall, but I don't think they're as crucial to need their own section in this video. Fixed some round stats not showing if you died during that round. That's a huge change. That was a really annoying bug that's been going around ever since that Ghost patch happened all those months ago. This added a Haste 1 power-up that's super niche, but it's also really cool. It adds more variety to the game, which I think is something World Wars needs, which I'll get into later. This is just a really good change, because some maps that just, like, you'd either have to be forced to block, which don't take fall damage, or you would take fall damage, which is annoying. New cosmetics are always cool. And these new maps are also seemingly all pretty good, but that's going to lead into the first place, which update has to fall off a little bit. In many of these new maps, there's a weird glitch that used to happen on an old map as well, when War was first released, but it got fixed in that Ghost patch as well, where if you approach the barrier of your spawn too closely, you will just get teleported back. And it seems really minor, but it's very annoying, and it can lead to certain power-up races becoming a little bit more annoying, because if you're trying to race for strength, you want to be up against your barrier so you can get there as soon as possible. And when you have this discrepancy of a teleport back and you have to like get as close as you can to getting teleported, it makes it a little bit more ping dependent. And I don't think it's a good thing to have present in the game, and I'm going to demonstrate that. This is a really minor example, but if you run to this fence post right here, I teleport you back, I can't be bothered to find a map where this happens all the time, because it's really annoying to queue and then sit for 60 seconds waiting for a game to start. But it's just that, but across the entire barrier. This map is also the perfect example of a new glitch that's been popping up on some of the new maps, which is relatively small, but some power-ups aren't exactly aligned properly. Like this chestplate up here is in the ground, and also off-centered. It's really minor, but it just looks a little bit unpolished, and I feel like it kind of shows that this update didn't have that much detail put into it. It just kind of seems like they just did what they had to do and pushed it out. There's also been a few bugs that have flown completely under the radar in this update and have been in the game since day one. On this map, there is a very similar glitch to the one previously mentioned, where if you're on red team and you try and use the portal in your spawn room before the game starts, you just get teleported right back to your spawn, which actually leaves blue with a bit of an advantage because you have a positional advantage when you want to rush for these bottom power-ups down here. If you're on red team and you try and go through this portal, you get teleported back immediately. You cannot go through this. This has been in the game since day one. It's dodged 2 patches now, the only 2 patches this game has had. And it leaves blue team with a heavy advantage, because there's a power-up down here that they can get to way before you, because you can't exactly just, like, be down there immediately. You have to run all the way through, and it's really bad. If you're on red team on this map, you legitimately have a strong disadvantage, and it matters a lot in such a competitive game mode like World Wars. Seeing as I just mentioned this game mode's pretty competitive, I think it's important that we talk about why this game mode has been successful where it has been, before I get into my next point. World Wars has been successful with the community it has, mostly because of its competitive nature. If you try and compare Minecraft to most esports titles like Valorant or Overwatch, you can see that there's a little bit of a difference in the way that most popular Minecraft game modes run, and how those esports titles run. But I feel like World Wars has kind of bridged the gap a little bit in a sense, where it plays very similarly to these esports titles, and it's very team-based. There's classes. It runs very, very similarly to these very popular games, and I feel like that's part of what makes it so popular with the people it is popular with. It feels like a good place that you can try and have a skill-based game mode, and it can still manage to be very fun. But I also think that there's been a few issues with this. First and foremost, despite its competitive nature, Wool Wars has, to be quite frank, abysmal balancing. The Archer kit is hilariously overtuned compared to the other kits, and Golem and Engineer are considered basically useless by everybody. It's really hard to play Wool Wars without being forced to run multiple Archers, whereas most other kits you can kinda just ignore. And Archer, it's also very frustrating. Having a kit that can regenerate arrows and also has permanent speed too is just not really fit for the type of game mode that Wool Wars is, and it feels very strong. I think to most people who have played much Wool Wars and have any idea of how game balancing should be and how Minecraft works, I think it's pretty easy for them to see that Archer's a very, very strong kit. Disproportionately strong, in fact. For the first part, I mean, with how limited armor is in Wool Wars, the tankiest kit being Tank, with 3 pieces of leather, or if you count Golem, but it's hilariously used because it's only for 5 seconds, gets 3 pieces of gold armor with protection too. People are very vulnerable to arrows. This bow will literally 3-hit kill him. It's a 3-hit kill to a swordsman. And that is crazy, because I also get my arrows back when I hit them. It's a really strong kit, and you can argue that you might be able to do damage, or you might be able to dodge arrows, and that you can get around it. But it's really hard to do that when there's also bow power-ups that can be present on the map that you can pick up to get more arrows. And when you have 4 archers pointed at a group of a team in a team-based game, you can just tear apart an entire team and do tons of damage before they have any time to react or do anything about it. The second part of Archer, I would actually argue, is possibly a little bit more overtuned than the bow itself. And this is the Archer's Keystone ability. In Wool Wars, every kit has a keystone that does a certain special ability. And Archer's is incredibly strong. It allows you to fling yourself backwards, pretty much across the entire map on most maps. And that doesn't sound too strong until you realize that it can get you in places you wouldn't normally be able to get to use your bowing. It allows you to run away from melee encounters, which is your one real weakness as Archer. And it also allows you to jump on people, to just combo them. Which leads into the next point. The next point of Archer is that it has a permanent speed too. This is overpowered for a couple of reasons. Number one is that it makes meleeing an Archer very difficult. Especially on Hypixel, speed 2 is a big advantage in melee encounters, and it can be really hard for anybody to really fight back. I know he's AFK, but I don't know, I don't feel like having him fight back. He's not here right now. The other issue with this is that it makes it very easy to run. In Archer, as Archer, the only way to really die is to get stabbed or bowed, and you really can't get stabbed if you can just outrun everybody. This is faster than somebody sprint jumping and chasing after me, unless it's a swordsman who pops their speed 4 ability. But in the case they do, I still have my ability to jump across the map and completely invalidate what they wanted to do. Archer has received no nerfs or any form of change since the release of Wool Wars, and it's been just destroying the game. The only real counter is a better Archer, and I think that it's pretty easy to see how it's unhealthy for the game if your only counter to a certain kit is someone better on that same kit. And it's not just me saying this either. Most people who are also on the leaderboard and active in the community would agree that Archer is very broken. But I think there's another issue in the fact that it discourages new players from playing Wool Wars. I know anecdotal evidence isn't exactly sound, but I have heard many players say that they don't enjoy Wool Wars because of how broken Archer Kit is, and they have a hard time getting into it, because it just feels like you're getting bowed constantly. It's also very frustrating for new players to Minecraft in general, who go to Hypixel, see that their newest game mode is Wool Wars, play it, expecting to have fun, and then get bowed by very sweaty players who just want to try and win some games. If you go on the Hypixel forums, and you search for Archer Kit on the Wool Wars forums, you get a wall of posts about Archer. Archer Kit, complaining about it. Archer nerf idea. Nerf Archer. Arthur needs an immediate nerf. Wow, Arthur needs an immediate nerf. That's crazy. Archer is about custom Wool Wars. Archer needs a serious nerf. It's just crazy. It's such a strong kit, and even these people who, I don't know who half people are, because they're not really in the community. But even they can see how strong Warlords is, even with their limited amount of play. It's a very strong kit, and I think that most people know it. There are also other issues with the game's kit balancing, which I mentioned briefly earlier, which is that Golem and Engineer tend to feel very weak compared to the other kits. I personally have faith that Golem can be used in some scenarios. I think that it's a niche kit, but I think that it still has some uses. But Engineer is practically completely useless. Engineer as a kit is very flawed. Has a wooden sword, has a bow and 4 arrows which do not regenerate, and then it has slightly above average tools and these absorption pots which last for 5 seconds. These are pretty much useless. They're probably the one thing this kit actually gets used for, if anything, because there are certain maps where you can push as a team with the absorption pot and it can come in handy, but they're generally pretty useless. Engineer's Keystone is just completely useless. It disables players from interacting with mid at all for 5 seconds. And I think it's actually broken, so I can't really show this off. Yeah, I can't, it's broken. But it completely just disables you from doing this. And it's just completely useless. There's no situation where it really helps you. The only time it can maybe be useful is if you place a block at the end of a round and then lock mid so they can't destroy it. But there is just no point in playing this kit. I think it's very easy to imagine for most people that this kit balance issue has caused a lot of health issues for this game mode. I think it's a big part of why the game mode has been slowing down. I think it's a big part of why the game has been struggling to get players. I think that it's a big problem in the game. But I don't think it's the only thing causing this game to struggle. Another big issue is a change they implemented in that Ghost patch I mentioned earlier, which is matchmaking. Warlords will try and match your party against parties of similar sizes, which on paper is a really good idea, but it leads to more issues than it really ended up fixing. The main issue with this feature stems from the fact that Warlords as a game is just too small to really support this idea, but there are a few other issues that are isolated from that concept. The first being that parties don't necessarily line up with other parties' skill. It can be very frustrating for newer players who maybe come from Bed Wars, who maybe come from TNT Tag or Murder Mystery, who want to queue some Warlords with some friends, and they get queued against a leaderboard party because it's the only other force stack on at the time, and they just get their asses handed to them because they're playing people who play the game all day. And they can't really queue anybody else because the matchmaking system stops them from doing it. The matchmaking system also breeds a lot of toxicity that's present in Warlords. There have been a lot of people who have been harassed in the community for dodging other parties. And I hate this server. There have been a few members of the community who have been harassed and bullied because they dodged too many parties. But it's easy to see why they wouldn't want to always queue other sweaty parties. They might want to just have some fun and sit down. But when they dodge a party, and then get queued against the party over and over again and keep dodging, it just tends to lead to a lot of toxicity among the community, and I think it's very hard to get rid of that issue without just getting rid of the matchmaking system as a whole. Another issue with matchmaking, which I mentioned earlier, the game is just too small to support it. Right now, if you try and queue with a party of 4, you are lucky if there is another party of 4 queuing at the time. And you're probably just going to be stuck queuing that one team for 10 to 20 games in a row if you really want to stick it out the whole time. There have been stretches where me and my parties will play the same party for legitimately over an hour straight. And we can't do anything about it because we're stuck queuing them because the matchmaking system forces us to. Unless we want to be the ones to dodge. Which leads back to the previous point, that it breeds a lot of toxicity when you do that in this community. Which is part of the community issue, but I think that the matchmaking system also enables it a lot. Not to mention, many of the higher up players have gotten out of the system entirely by just queuing in parties of 3 or 2, where they're playing the easier games and they're still getting the stats they want to get. The matchmaking system is very flawed in a lot of ways, and I feel like it's a good idea that was implemented very poorly and has just made the game run a lot worse. So was this update bad? No, definitely not. It was actually great to see the admins actually know the game still exists after they just completely ignored the game after releasing it for 8 months. but I think that it didn't touch on the most important things that the game needs to have addressed. And I think that's upset a lot of the community. Anyways, thank you for your time. I'm sorry this video's been really messy, and it's been lacking a script if you couldn't tell. I have to... oh, wow. We're gonna do it in Limbo. I have to leave tomorrow. I'm gonna go away for the weekend, and I want to try and get this video out before I go away, so that way the admins are still looking at Wool Wars as a game while this gets posted. But I think we all in the community just want to see this game grow, and we want to make it a better game. I hope someday we can achieve that. Thank you for your time. Thank you.